Greetings, everyone. I'm Mary Song from the Center for Sacred Sciences here in Eugene, Oregon. And my guest today is our own David Cunningham, who's one of our teachers for the center. And David, you live in Nashville, Tennessee now.
That's correct.
That's that's something. You have moved recently, and we're going to talk
Yes.
about that a little bit later about why that move
Okay.
took place. But I have been
Okay.
wanting to interview you for at least a year now, and we have finally gotten our schedules to work, and here we are now to speak on Zoom, which feels like in person to me. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I have several questions for you. And the
Okay.
first one is I'm wondering just where did you grow up?
I grew up in Pasadena, California. Um, yeah, that was the place I lived until I went away to college.
And I understand that you came from a family, you might say, with affluence. I recall
Mhm.
hearing you talk about that one time. Your family had enough, a firm foundation, and so on. But something
Mhm.
happened there that caused you to realize that the American dream doesn't really bring happiness. Can you talk
Yeah,
about that?
I think it was a combination of a couple of things. One of them was the departure of my mother, who, when I was 5 years old, basically ran away from home. My mother, had lost her father when she was 11 years old. I think he was a fireman and he was walking home from work and basically dropped dead on that walk home. Yeah, so it was a total shock for the family. And this was long before I was born, of course. But my mother loved her dad and did not get along well with her mother.
Hmm.
And so I think that sort of set her life off on a difficult path.
Yes.
And she spent a lot of the rest of her life, I think, trying to, I don't know what's a kind way of saying it, but somehow make up for that horrid loss.
Yeah.
And I don't think she ever really succeeded in that, because I don't think she ever really dealt with the essence, which was just, her great sorrow over that loss.
Hmm.
So she was sort of a broken person in some ways. And so, like I said, she ran off when I was 5 and my brother was 3 and my sister was 1. So she left 3 young kids, ran off with another guy who she subsequently married and had 3 more kids
Hmm.
who we came to know pretty well. We spent like every other weekend together. So that probably patched up some of the split,
Hmm.
if you will, and grew fairly close. But to this day, I still look at her disappearance as the sort of, I don't know what to say it, the big event
Hmm.
that altered a lot of our lives in ways that probably we're still exploring.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It
So,
ripples on through your life. Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Continues to unfold.
yeah. Um, although I have felt in recent years like it's kind of done. I mean, in the sense, it's a story, it's the past, it was there, it left lots of emotional issues,
Hmm.
but a lot of that has sort of been rectified or at least come to peaceful
Yeah.
terms with.
I'm glad to hear that. Yes.
Yeah, me too. And actually, I think it sort of settled itself some times ago in my case. I mean, I was the
Mhm.
oldest of the kids, so
Yeah.
uh, I've had longer to adjust. And I know my brother and sister definitely suffered from it too. So,
Yeah.
but
And
that
you,
was the big, go ahead.
that was a big event. And in your
Yeah.
case, it sounds to me like it led to an early spiritual calling. From what I know about your story, it was very early in life that you began to seek. Is
Yes,
that
that's
true? Can
correct.
you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, so my father remarried, um, married my stepmom, who is still alive. My father's not, but she is. She's just a very kind person. I really like her a lot. Didn't always get along with her back in the early days, but I really, really care for her now.
Hmm.
And at one point, when I was a teenager, she said to me one day, she attended an Episcopal church there in Pasadena, and she said to me, you know, they've got a new youth teacher at the church, and he's a really neat guy, really cool guy, and he's trying to talk with teens about spiritual stuff.
Hmm.
I had already had a guitar teacher. My younger brother's a guitarist and good, and I wasn't good, but I went to his same teacher. And one day he and I were talking, the guitar teacher and I were talking. And for some reason, he sort of looked at me and said, you ever heard of a guy named Paramahansa Yogananda? And I said, no, I don't think so. And he started to talk to me about Yogananda's autobiography, which he'd been reading.
Autobiography of a Yogi.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is a book I still reread occasionally from time to time. I love it.
And
I think
it's a
it's a
book
wonderful
that
book.
many of us encounter
Yeah.
early on the path. For some
Yeah.
reason, that book comes along.
Yeah. Yeah. And we lived in LA, like I said, and that was not far from where Yogananda worked for several years before he
Uh-huh.
died. Yeah. So anyway, it was a remarkable story to me, very unlike the Christian stuff I had heard up to that point.
Yeah.
And it was the way that I learned about at least the theoretical possibility of experiential spiritual recognition.
Hmm.
And that idea just captivated me.
Captivation. Yes, I can identify with that. Just being, I mean, so called, feeling there's something to be discovered, and then certain books like this, and the exposure to certain ideas, you feel captivated by it. It's calling to you.
Yeah, it really was. And I think part of it was just Yogananda himself. I mean, I loved his book, and it was sort of cool living relatively close to where he had been for quite some time.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I did have that sort of Catholic background. Um, so it's not like I went from never having heard of God or anything like that. I had a long church association. And I just sort of let that be, for some amount of time. I mean, I kept reading his books, started reading some other stuff, all of which just captivated me all the more.
Uh-huh.
And there was one point in time where I don't remember the exact circumstances now, but I went to an alternative high school,
Hmm.
and one of the teachers there ended up talking with me, and he too had spiritual interest, and he sensed somehow that I did also, I guess from some of our conversations. And one day he said to me, and we were in, like I said, the greater LA area. And one day he said to me, I'm looking at a couple of weeks from now, taking a road trip up to the San Francisco Bay Area, where I'm going to go spend a couple of days with Swami Muktananda.
Uh-huh. Of the Siddha
And
Yoga Foundation. Yes?
exactly,
Siddha
that's
Yoga.
right.
Hmm.
That's the one. And he said, I know you have some interest in this stuff, and I was wondering if you'd like to come with me. And I said, oh, hell yes. And so we went and spent a couple of days there, and it was a life-changing experience for me. Um, and I became a student of Muktananda's for several years.
Oh.
Yeah, which included living in his ashram in New York State, upstate New York,
In the
for
Catskills?
some, yes, in the Catskills, for an entire summer, where I lived at the ashram and, did my jobs, and we meditated and had teachings daily and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of that, of course, I was hooked completely on the spiritual path.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so time went on, and Muktananda went back to India. So I didn't have a teacher there and everything. Um, and then after some period of time, I don't know how much anymore, I was in the Bodhi Tree bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
So, living in the greater LA area, that was, I don't know, half-hour drive or something. And I was already an addict on the place.
So you'd
Um,
gone there many times.
many.
Yeah.
Um, and while I was there one day, I was looking for stuff, and I had read any number of spiritual books, like Yogananda's book, um, from teachers that were within the different traditions. And that day that I was in the Bodhi tree, I asked one of the staff there, I've been doing this reading and that reading Yogananda's book and blah, blah, blah. I said, but, I'm kind of, I'd love to find a book, if I could, if you know of any such thing, written by an American teacher,
Mhm.
someone who's just talking my language and I didn't have to translate Hindi or whatever and blah, blah, blah. And the guy stood there for a minute, he was kind of scratching his chin. He said, after a couple of minutes, he said, there used to be a guy who worked here who has now left.
I know what you're going to say.
Yes, you do.
Keep going. No, I want to hear it.
and, and he said, yeah, so he's out on his own, kind of doing some teaching stuff. And we got a copy of his autobiography right over here.
Okay, I'm holding it
That
right
be
now.
that be the one.
First edition, Naked Through the
And
Gate.
that even looks like my copy of it too. I
Yeah,
think I have
I
two or
look at
three
it.
of them. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Mine too. And so he took me over it and he said, there's the book. And I started thumbing through a little bit. I said, oh, this looks pretty interesting. Great, thanks. We get this. So I got it, brought it home, read it voraciously. And I was just stunned by it.
Now let me break in here because
Yeah.
I first read the book about 30 years ago and I just recently reread it. And,
Mm,
in rereading it, I thought, oh, I don't remember reading that part before, or that part. And
yeah.
that, wow,
Yeah.
this really puts together. So it's worth reading again later
Yeah.
on and
I-
refreshing one's memory.
yeah. And I do plan to do that. I've got my copy of it is, we moved here about 9, 10 months ago.
Yes.
And a lot of our stuff is still in a storage place, including that book.
Yeah.
So once we get it out of storage, that's the first thing I'm going to do is
Yeah.
reread that book. Yeah, because it was a life changer for me. And
That moment you went in the Bodhi Tree bookstore in LA and asked for a book by a Western mystic, a
oh,
contemporary, so living mystic, that changed your life. I mean, without that moment, we wouldn't be sitting here talking right now.
that's right.
So, sometimes these things unfold in life
Oh yeah.
whereby
Oh
we
yeah.
don't know what's going to happen next. And
No.
suddenly,
Yeah. That's right.
yeah,
And it was, to use kind of old-fashioned language, it was really like God was guiding me completely unbeknownst to me.
yes.
You know. So
Sometimes we resist that
yeah.
flow. And when we let go, we may find it's great good fortune. It's
Yeah.
we were
And
seeking.
fortunately for me, I didn't resist at that time. I looked at this book and I thought, wow, this guy's a little different. This is kind of interesting. So when I finished reading the book, I was so moved by it. I had never had any contact with him,
Mhm.
but I wrote him a letter. There was something in the book about how you could contact him. And I wrote him a letter in which I basically just said, you have no idea how important your book was to me. And it was Yeah, it was definitely one of the seminal moments in my life reading your
Oh.
book. Thank you, thank you, thank you for writing it. And I never expected to hear back from him. I'd never met the guy. He'd never met me. He didn't know me from, Santa Claus. So, and so I was astonished when I got a letter back from him.
Yeah.
And I just thought, holy shit,
Yeah. You're
this
communicating
guy,
now.
this guy is something different, you know.
Hmm.
And he wrote me back a meaningful, significant letter. And that was the start of a great friendship
Yeah.
because from that point on, I continued to talk with him by
Hmm.
letter,
Hmm.
maybe even once or twice on the phone or something. And at some point, I just decided, I know who my teacher is.
Yeah.
And so thereafter, I started getting involved in retreats, up there. And, one thing led to another, and week-long retreats, 2-week-long retreats, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, all that completely changed my life.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, I knew almost immediately that this guy was the real deal.
Hmm.
I don't know how I knew it. I had this complete confidence or faith or whatever that whoever he is, whatever he is, I'm supposed to be learning from this guy, at least for now.
I have to say, I had the same response to Joel when I first met him. I thought,
Mm,
here's a truth talker. What a wonderful thing to land in my backyard here, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
But I want to
yeah,
point out that the book, Joel reveals sections of his life. For example, being in Vietnam, being a soldier in Vietnam, and then being a Vietnam vet, and somehow going from that to being a Hollywood producer, working with the stars. And
there's some hard left turns going
I
on
know
there.
there's a lot of information that
Yeah,
is about
yeah,
a real person uh, in a life, and that urge to find what is true arises. It takes him a lot of
yeah,
different places, and we get to read that, and many of us do identify with that that everyday life stuff happening, where we go with it, and how that calling arises. There's something I need
right,
to discover.
right,
And when you
exactly.
find a teacher like you did and like I did, you recognize it. You recognize that moment.
Yeah. And I think like for me, I didn't go to Vietnam. I didn't fight in a war, but I did have trauma in my life, just
Hmm.
like Joel did from the war. And so I think that was sort of a connection for me too.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this guy has suffered differently from me, but he's suffered and he knows about suffering and he's addressing it directly.
Hmm.
I've got something to learn from this guy.
What about your family life during that time? Now, I know that you met Bailey, I think, in LA, who was your
Mm-hmm.
wife, and you
Yeah.
had children. And
Yeah.
so family life was continuing to unfold
Uh-huh.
um, at the same time of your spiritual calling. And I think you had another profession, or you had a profession.
Yes,
Maybe you
I
could tell
did.
us about that, what all that was like.
I worked at a county auditor's office in the county where we live, where I was actually the number two guy ultimately there.
Uh-huh.
I sort of worked my way up over a course of, I don't know, maybe 20 years. I'm not sure. And uh, there just came a point where I just felt like, well, okay, I've done this long enough and
Mhm.
actually got a pretty good pension from it. So
Uh-huh.
I feel like it's time for me to end that phase
Yeah.
and maybe concentrate even more on my spiritual path.
Uh-huh.
And having reached that point, with a pension and everything, it sort of gave us a kind of freedom that we hadn't had.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like it's some huge pension, but it's enough. And so gradually, um, our oldest son, who you saw here
Uh-huh.
just for a few seconds, big guy, He was both a college and professional football player.
Aha.
Yeah, yeah.
You have
So
two sons. Yes, you have two
yes,
sons.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And this is really his house that we have moved to, his and his wife's, where they have a baby daughter who's incredibly charming and made a drooling grandpa out of me. Yeah,
And she's another
and
teacher for you, probably.
there you go. But yeah, the teacher full of just joy and grace. I mean,
Yeah,
she's just really amazing experience.
beautiful.
And yeah, that's wonderful. And he's got 7 beautiful acres here in Nashville, and so a beautiful place to just take walks on and
Yeah.
breathe. And yeah, so it's worked out really nice. I think I veered away from wherever you
That's
started,
okay.
but
We're going to talk
okay,
about how you came to move there in just a moment. But
okay.
I wanted to point out to our listeners that you went from years of attending retreats with Joel and being in some kind of dialogue with Joel at a distance. And now you're a spiritual teacher in Joel's lineage. How did you get there? How'd that happen?
After having, the spiritual teachers I've mentioned here and all the various practices, I gradually sort of, what's the right way to say this? I recognize that I think like a lot of spiritual students,
Mm-hmm.
um, one of the teachings, the one around which selflessness is basically wrapped,
Mm-hmm.
is that you have to give up yourself completely.
Yeah.
And
Or it has to collapse in some way, the whole structure of it.
exactly so.
Because it would be nice if we could say, oh, I'll just give it up.
Yeah,
It doesn't
but
quite work that way for most of
no.
us.
Yeah, I was going to say, at least on my case, it's not. So, over the course of time, as I kept reading and thinking and communicating with Joel and all that stuff, the recognition I gradually surrendered to
Mm-hmm.
was that I was not doing that teaching. I was not letting go of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized that I didn't really even know what the hell that meant.
I
I
was going
had
to ask you
no,
what that meant because
yeah,
my thought was, oh, you must have noticed greed arising or jealousy arising or all of these things entangling the mind.
mhm,
Yeah.
any and all of the above.
Yeah.
And um, I really had no idea what to do with that or about it.
Mm.
I just recognized that that was the case. And I started, I read lots of teachers, Nisargadatta, you
Yes.
name them. And their teachings meant lots to me. I mean, in addition to Joel, but I mean, Nisargadatta, like I said, and lots of other teachers. And, one day one of the things we used to live close to the beach, and I used to often drive there and walk on
Right.
the beach. And so I was just thinking about it as I was walking one day, and I just thought, pardon my French, but you're just bullshitting, dude.
Mhm.
This is
Yeah.
this is not the real thing.
Yeah.
This is not self-surrender.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what self-surrender means.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's a word or a term, and I understand the assigned meaning,
Yeah.
but do I know what it means from an experiential standpoint? No.
Mm.
And so I sort of like dropped a lot of the stuff I was doing and settled down. I tried to focus on like one thing. And I eventually ended up I'm sort of a Janani kind of guy, if you hadn't
I
noticed.
have noticed that.
Yeah. And I sort of settled on a form of inquiry, as opposed to the bhakti path, more the Janani. Um, And the inquiry eventually boiled down to a question: who am I
Mm.
really? Or, and this
What?
is the one, yeah, yeah, and this was the one that really got me, was the question, what is me? And that's when I started doing inquiry. That question, what is me?
Mhm.
I mean, okay, here I am walking on the beach. I feel my feet on the sand
Yeah.
or on the path wherever I was. I feel sensations in my hands, on my face from the sun, et cetera, on and on and on and on.
Beautiful.
And I realized, pardon the French again, none of this shit is me
Mhm.
because it all comes and goes.
Mhm.
And as the center teaches, but consciousness remains.
Mhm.
What could that possibly mean? And I thought, I don't have a damn clue. And I just kept doing it completely with no clue. Is this me?
But
Is this thought me? Is this sensation me? Is this da 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 me? And the answer was always no.
but you did it with passion, yeah? Because
Oh,
what I remember you saying is there was fury,
yeah.
just
Oh, yeah.
anger and fury about this. The fury, I recall you saying, really propelled you. It
Yeah.
fueled your inquiry.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fury was sort of over my own stupidity, which, I know now I would never say to somebody else about their practice. But that's how I felt sort of toward myself. It's like, what
Mm.
are you missing, stupid? I mean, this isn't me.
Oh,
This
so
isn't me.
harsh.
This isn't me. This isn't me. So what's left? And then one day, it just, as the wording of this at the center says, between two steps,
Yeah.
as I was walking on that beach, and really literally, one foot was up and the other was on the ground, and between those two,
Wow. Wow.
that was it.
That was it.
And I just started laughing my ass off.
That's a common response to awakening.
Yeah.
Because everything
And
crumbles, you took so seriously, crumbles away. It's like, oh, I was so tied up with all of this. And
and for me, it was the recognition that, dude, how did you miss this?
mhm,
This has always, excuse me, been the case.
it's right
Always.
there. Yes.
There was never anything missing, lacking, whatever. It's just, I don't know, you were in some dream someplace or
Right.
something.
Right.
And like I said, I just laughed.
Exactly.
I think I laughed for days. Tried to conceal it, hide it a bit. But anyway, at one point, that's where I wrote Joel and said, well, guess what happened here?
Speaking of Joel, this
Uh,
book,
yeah.
you can see all my notes.
Yeah. Right.
This is
Well,
Joel's second book, The Way of
yeah.
Selflessness. And
Yeah.
I recall that you said you were, while you're out there on the beach, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were here in the instructions for effortless contemplation, and you had memorized this and you were repeating it back to yourself.
Yeah.
Do you think that helped? Was that a helpful?
I still repeat it to this day.
Oh my goodness.
So, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once again, you never know what it is that's going to really fuel you,
Yeah.
or open you, or that moment in
Yeah.
the Bodhi Tree bookstore, a passage
Yeah.
in a book.
Yeah. And, so I kind of think about it like consciousness has no limit. So, what that means is there's no end to this ride.
Yeah,
And there's no such thing as being finished or done.
right.
There's an unknown infinity of
Infinity,
it,
that's the word. Yeah,
yeah, of isness or something to be discovered over what, all of eternity? I don't know.
yeah.
Who knows while we're on this rock, you know?
Right.
So
Which is apparently flying through space with the whole galaxy and the whole Milky Way, and we're never in
Right.
the same place twice. Very,
Right. And as one book I've read said, the universe of universes,
ah, yeah,
which I think is a neat way to say it.
yeah.
I mean, it's like, yeah. So anyway, it was just, that's what it was.
You talked with Joel, and
Yeah.
Joel invited you to come to the center and give an awakening talk. And I was there for that talk. It was in 2018 at our building here in Eugene, Oregon, and the community asked you to teach, and you have become one of our teachers for several years now. Was that an easy transition for you to take the seat of the teacher? Did it just effortless flow, or was there some blocks or roadblocks or?
Honestly, I don't remember, but I sort of want to say that, I mean, I think I felt like I stumbled around a bit at the beginning.
Mhm.
But I also had a lot of experience from listening to Joel.
Yeah,
So I think I figured I'd just sort of try and copy that in the sense of just saying what I knew from experience
mhm,
and owning what I didn't. Uh, and saying to people, I'm just basically here to serve you. And, if we can talk and if it means something to you, great. And if you want to move on, blessings to you. And that's still sort of the way I do it to this day.
beautiful. So it's selfless service. I mean, it has its own
Yeah.
rewards.
Yeah,
Uh,
it really does. That's true.
yeah, a sense of alignment. I feel, I don't know if you feel this, but in teaching for the center, I feel it's sort of timeless. So the whole mind thing of time drops away when I'm teaching. It's just this alignment that happens. Do you feel that too?
Yeah. And
Something like that?
especially when with, whoever the students are, if we've got a sort of camaraderie, which we have always sort of seemed to have.
Yeah,
And I think it's just because we're open with each other.
yeah.
And we talk about what's real to us on our path or, whatever. In my case, if I can make any helpful suggestions or anything like that. Pardon me. And we just always seem to get a lot from it.
That's
I mean,
great.
I do just from their presence, and they
Yeah,
seem to get something from what I say or what we all say, because lots of them are, very bright people who have had lots of
that's right.
insight of their own. So that's the best, really, when everybody feels open to just share with each other
Hmm.
and thereby really, I think, help each other on their
Hmm.
paths.
Yeah, the value of kindred spirits and
Yeah.
the sense of community has
Yeah.
meant so much to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes the community are we're kind of far flung, but with technology we can feel like we're right here together. And that's in your case too, because you're afar and people are
Yeah.
zooming in
Yeah.
to Tennessee to be with you every week,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so that's some good fortune we have.
Well, and it's good fortune for me too, because the meetings mean a great deal to me. It's just, it means a great deal to be with others of like mind,
Yeah, and
because
yes,
our culture today, it's not really supportive of this kind of,
isolation, separation.
yeah. You know
Yes,
what Bailey and I have been watching lately is the TV show The Chosen. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen that. No.
Highly recommended. It's about the life of Jesus
Oh,
and the followers who came to him. And it's one of the best productions I've ever seen about a spiritual thing. It's multi-piece. There's three or four different sections of it.
uh-huh.
And it's an incredibly believable presentation of Jesus as just another guy who, oh, also, by the way, is, whatever,
Awake.
whatever. Well, awake at the least, if
Yeah.
not way beyond that. Why did I even bring that up? Well, because that's one of the things that,
About
you
community
know,
and kindred
yeah,
spirits and yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And It's hard to find.
It is hard to find, and I don't take it for granted because I think there are far too many people who do live in isolation, longing for
Yeah, yeah,
connection and for truth.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I think we
And
agree.
there's so little in our culture to
Yeah,
reinforce that.
yeah,
And so I couldn't put it better than you put it. You know, it's just really important.
yeah, yeah. Now, on June 4th last year, so that was 2023, you gave a Sunday talk which was entitled How a Gnostic Experiences Alzheimer's. I don't know if you put the title on or if Tom put the title on, but I went back and listened to, and I was there when you gave the talk. Um, and of course, in that talk, you're revealing to us that you had received a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. And at that time, you said, quote, the mystical path can put us in the best possible context for dealing with such truths. So at the time that you gave the talk about a year ago, you appeared to be accepting of it. And so, what can you tell us now about what's going on with it?
As far as I know, they don't really have any cure.
Hmm.
They have some treatments, but some of them sound like they're very dangerous.
Ah,
Yeah. So I haven't done anything extraordinary.
so you're not on
And
any trial drugs or anything like that?
no, because the trials I've read about uh, have occasionally led to death.
Ah,
Yeah. So I sort of keep looking every once in a while to see if there seem to be any changes. And Nashville, where we are now, is a huge medical
yes, it is.
center.
St.
So
Jude's Children's
yeah,
Hospital and all of that.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And they're so far our experience with them, Bailey had a little issue a while ago she had to get dealt with, and other stuff has come up in the family. And they've
And
all,
it's why you've moved to Nashville to live
yeah, to
with
be
your
with our
son
son.
and daughter-in-law.
Yeah,
And yeah,
right,
and
right.
to have that support.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And all of that's been wonderful. So, you know, I still have lousy memory. I might ask you 10 minutes from now, did I say this?
We'll play the tape back and
Yeah, right.
well,
Which eventually drives my wife nuts sometimes. I can't blame her, but
yeah.
you know, and it'll probably shorten my life. I'm guessing my father had it.
Hmm.
And I think it probably shortened his life, and it probably will mine, but you know, this is where the spiritual path just sort of makes you go, yeah,
That's what you said. The mystical path can put us in the best possible context for dealing with such truths. Like here it comes. Okay.
yeah,
What does the Gnostic
yeah,
do with this? And when you
right.
gave the talk a year ago, when I heard it, I was very sad. I had all this sorrow come up, and I spoke to you on that talk, and I said, "Aren't you sad?" And at the time, you said, "No, I'm surprised. I'm not sad. I don't know if I will become sad or what." So, do you feel any sorrow over this, or?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes, but it's more uh how do I say this? It's more about the difficulties I cause others, like my wife,
Ah, yeah, yeah.
you know, like repeating things a lot,
Hmm.
which can really get annoying.
Yeah.
And and our son a little bit too, but he's just incredibly gracious. Um, yeah, what he and his wife have done is just really something,
Yeah.
just to put us up here. And they're actually building another house for us on the property,
Wow.
but separate. And so, like I said, it's a beautiful place. I wish I could show you. There's, yeah, so it's like you can't really complain about our digs. Um, and you know, life is, I mean, a lot of people on this planet have a life 1,000 times more
Oh,
difficult than mine.
I know. You're a
I mean, I
lucky man
watched,
in a lot of ways. I mean, as
oh,
I hear your
many ways.
story and the
Yeah.
way things unfold for you,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I hear lots of good fortune there.
Oh, absolutely. It's really, I, I talk to God and I give
Yeah,
thanks a lot because, yeah, I'm a very fortunate guy. I'm well aware of the fact that most of this planet doesn't live anything like this.
right.
And, it could be worse
Yeah,
by a whole lot. And the Alzheimer's, it is what it is. We're all going to die. I mean, this is one thing, this is one respect in which my spiritual path has done an incredible service for me.
hmm
I know that death is a certainty. And I think I stopped fighting it a long time ago.
hmm
And I'll enjoy health as long as I have it. And even though there are some respects in which I've got issues, I'm functioning reasonably well with my family's help and able to commune with our community, which
Yes, you're
means
you're very
everything.
lucid and giving. I mean, so in some ways it hasn't disrupted. I mean, you did make this
Yeah,
big move, but you're still
yeah,
teaching, you have
yeah.
students, and you're doing an interview with me and continuing to serve
Yeah.
in this way. Now, a year
Which
ago,
means a great deal to me.
yeah,
I mean, it's my
absolutely.
connection with others who are of the same mind,
Yeah,
and it's vitally important to me.
yeah, me too. Now, a year ago, you said that the memory loss um, was problematic, but you felt at ease resting in the emptiness of not remembering. Now, how are you experiencing it now? I mean, then you were
Pretty much,
resting in the emptiness, still so?
yeah, yeah. And sometimes I feel bad because I piss off my wife because I'm asking her for the fourth time
Yeah,
where XYZ is or something.
right.
So I feel a little bad about that. But other than that, no, I'm good.
So, so the progression hasn't been noticeable. So in the past year, there hasn't been a big swing one way or the other. It's continued to be short-term memory loss and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I can't be sure. I mean, there are times when it seems like it's more bothersome.
Okay.
Uh, but then, something happens and it sort of snaps back, and whatever it was I was trying to remember and lost, then it's back.
Yeah.
Maybe very briefly, but long enough for me to write it down or whatever I was wanting to do with it. And so, it's still bothersome. I guess that would be a term I could use.
You,
Uh,
you said spiritual recognition of selflessness is not affected by Alzheimer's so far. That's what you said a year ago. So
I
that
would still
spiritual
say that.
yeah. So that's
I would
solid.
still say that. Yeah. Yeah. And it makes me laugh because it's so solid because it just is the truth. And it's
Mhm.
like you and I were talking about a few minutes ago. When you recognize this, at least for me, my thought was something I'm using my language, so I use it, but it was just sort of, you moron, how could you have missed this for all
Yeah.
these years?
Yeah.
And, it didn't have the angry tone that those words
My
might
sweet
seem to
loving
convey.
moron.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Thank you. Yes. My sweet loving moron. Would you not be so stupid next time? um, but now it's just, yeah, oh, yeah, this is just what it is. This is just the
And
vastness.
the light of awareness shines ever bright. Now, here's a question. I wonder, um, are you able to observe a memory collapsing? I
Yeah.
mean, so you're so focused in awareness that you see the thought arise and then you see that it's collapsing and you can't remember what it was. You
That's
see that
happened
happen.
just earlier today.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. And it's a great teacher too, because sort of a la the rest of the spiritual path, what I find is if I stop resisting, okay, the memory's slipping away. Instead of grasping for it, try and relax
Hmm.
and just have, I don't know, faith, whatever, that if it'll come back if it's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
And it does.
Hmm.
And if it doesn't come back, then I guess it wasn't that important.
This is radical acceptance. The
Yes.
reason I bring it up is because when I go to sleep at night, my mind is lit up. I can see the thoughts arising, and as I go into sleep, I notice a shift in the I don't know, brainwaves, I guess, and that whatever I was thinking starts falling away, and I'm going into dreams. Right there
Hmm.
goes.
Hmm.
And you see the hypnagogic images arise or whatever it is, and um, yeah, it's, a lot of people don't have that experience of watching so
Yeah.
closely the thought arise and the thought departs. So in your case,
It's,
you can see it arise and then it falls away. Oh, I don't know what I was
yeah.
just thinking. Oh, well.
Yeah. 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 It is an interesting experience. And like I said, and as so many teachings say, if you don't fight against it, it's like you choosing not to pour gasoline on the fire.
Hmm.
So it is seeming like the smart way to handle things.
Understand what you
Accept,
mean. Yeah.
yeah, accept what is, which creates an open, empty space, which is what most things need
Hmm.
to flourish.
Yeah.
So,
And you're accepting the certainty of death of the body. And so many of us in our society, we don't want to think about that. I'm
yeah,
somebody who's going to actually live to be 150, and modern medicine's going to keep me going. I'm not going to. But the truth is, old age, if you get to live, old
right,
age,
right.
sickness or infirmities and death. And, the Buddha taught so much about this, how this is a cause of suffering because we resist.
Yeah,
And in your case, you're accepting.
yeah.
And it's such an amazing thing to watch, David. I'm just so, I'm captivated, actually, which is why I wanted to interview you. What
Hmm.
advice do you have for spiritual practitioners who are faced with diagnoses or impairments? Could be early in life, actually, but many of
Hmm.
us in the latter part of life, it's
Yeah,
coming. All these things come,
yeah,
and
right,
boy, we can be disappointed in that. We can be angry. We can start blaming, right?
right,
That
right.
doctor, or whatever. And
Yeah.
so, what advice do you have, given your experience?
Well, probably a number of things. First is recognize that reality is, and maybe just use that phrase, reality is, and it may be a bitch according to what I want,
Hmm.
but it is what it is.
Hmm.
So find a way to stop struggling against what is because you're not going to win that battle. Sometimes we can change things a little bit in some ways or other, but the progression from youth to old age, you can't stop that.
Hmm.
So don't fight it. Instead, use your energy on your spiritual path,
Yeah.
you know,
To
try and
cultivate awareness. Yeah. To
yeah,
cultivate
cultivate
awareness.
awareness. Try to learn how to breathe deep and let go and just let things be as they are because they already are what they are. So what are you going to do?
It
You can
can
stand
be.
there and stomp your feet and cry and whine and bitch and moan, but that's all you're going to do.
Hmm.
So what you can really attend to is your own psychological, emotional, spiritual health.
Hmm.
So do that.
It can be confusing
You know.
when we say it is what it is, and then we're thinking, do I really know what it is? Or am I, you know, being misled by the ego? Or, it can be confusing when we say it is what it is. Because on the spiritual path, we learn that what we thought we were is not true. It's a
Right.
beautiful fiction. So I can see where people would have confusion about that point. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Well, and I think it's a great example of it is what it is
Hmm.
because, you know, maybe we had some vision of I'm going to be enlightened and floating on a cloud and da da da. No, I'm going to be sick and have a body that's aging and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll fly on the clouds when you jump on a jet and go to another part of the country. But in other words, you're probably not going to ascend into the air and da 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 da.
Yeah.
So accept it.
Yeah. For me, it's a cloud of unknowing. Don't
Yeah.
know, don't have to
Yeah.
figure it out. It
No.
appears to be this.
Right.
And I mean, one can then become totally engaged in the mind telling stories about what
Yeah.
this means, and the spiritual practitioner can observe those stories and recognize, oh, that's a story. Let that go. Let that go. Let that go. What's left? Oh, I don't know.
Right. Back to don't
Awareness.
know mind, which is really where we live, period. End of sentence, for our whole time here on this mud road. You know,
Isn't it
I
amazing?
mean, it is amazing. I mean, it's amazing to be, to exist, to have a life. And, okay, maybe it's not a perfect life according to some stories, but can you show me one that was?
Yeah.
I mean, to go back to the Jesus example, they nailed the guy on the cross who was one of the more important persons in the history of humanity. If they're going to treat him like that, I can't expect anything special myself.
Ah, there you go. You're not going to be saved from all this old age, sickness, and death
No,
thing.
no, no. Yeah, this was all black once upon a time.
I
When
remember
my
you
wife
from
met,
the old days, actually.
well, there you go. There you
But we
go.
were always in silence at the retreat, so I didn't get to speak with you.
Yeah. So I don't know what my wife would have thought if she'd known it was going to turn into this, but there it is. So
Yeah. Did you have
uh,
more advice on this matter? Because I jumped in there and I didn't know if you had 1 point, 2 points, or 3 points. What advice you have for spiritual practitioners who are facing a diagnosis? So, I mean, their world has been rocked. Oh, now I've been told this, and maybe a prognosis, only this much time, or impairment such that I can't walk the way I used to walk. I can't get up out of a chair. I'm in pain, chronic pain, or whatever. Anything else you can say for
um,
practitioners?
I'm probably going to repeat myself, but
That's okay.
Alzheimer's.
I do it all the time myself.
But I would start by saying just be gentle with yourself. Find a way, learn a way, practice a way, be gentle with yourself. And that even includes be gentle with yourself about not being gentle with yourself. When you
Mm,
recognize that you are beating yourself over the head again, instead of beating yourself over the head for beating yourself over the head, just recognize it. Do some deep breathing,
mm,
hold your hands on your belly and do some deep belly breathing until the physical sensations in the body, which we so much associate with. We say me, I, and we mean the body, mind. That's because we identify with the sensations. The
yeah.
consciousness itself is unaffected by the sensations, but the body is like,
Mm.
oh.
I tell you what, consciousness right now is observing goosebumps breaking out all over this body from that
Well,
teaching that you just gave.
well, there you go. So just let the sensations be.
Yeah, to
And
open your heart to yourself, to
right.
and when you're hard on yourself, to open your heart to that which is being hard.
Yes. Yes. Because that's a
come all back home. Yeah. Come home.
As we sometimes say, that's a suffering being too.
Yeah.
So be generous to that suffering being
Mm,
because he or she has his or
so
her own
important.
story,
That's so
and
important because people can become angry. I mean,
yeah,
I've had some experience in my past being angry at a physical situation or an illness,
yeah,
and in a way, it's a natural response. Oh, I didn't want this, and
yeah,
to
yeah.
really
It's completely natural response.
open the heart, yeah,
Yeah,
opening the heart
yeah,
to all of it.
yeah, yeah. And I've got to think, excuse me, consistent with a lot of medical thinking these days, I think that when we get ourselves all wrapped up in uh, fear,
Mm,
uh, sadness, etc.,
mhm,
those emotions affect the body
mm,
in ways that, as far as we know, aren't so helpful.
yeah.
Lots of stuff starts flowing in the body. It's like the body's emergency system, like the saber-toothed tiger is just inches away from it.
Oof,
And that's not a good healing philosophy.
mhm. Right.
So have compassion
Have
for the
compassion.
suffering being, which is the one in here.
And remember your practices too, because
Yes,
as
yes,
spiritual practitioners, we can just throw it out the window. Well, I'm angry. I'm going
yeah,
to, fuel it up and be
yeah,
angry and blame. So to remember, and I think, your whole unfolding is a remembrance. The way you were memorizing passages and keeping that going through your mind, and also Tai Chi was a main practice for you. The practices are needed. I mean, when things like this
yeah,
happen,
yeah,
that's what I mean.
yeah.
That's what it cultivates that ability to
That's
stay.
right. And anything, like becoming a musician is an act that we cultivate by
Yeah,
constant repetition.
yeah,
And the spiritual path is no different in that respect.
yeah,
We have to cultivate it by practicing it, really ideally all the time.
yeah,
So mantra practice, for example, is in a
yeah.
way we can be driving or walking or whatever and practicing our spiritual path. And we might notice something that's unpleasant or remember or think about something unpleasant, but then we can just offer that up and make each act an act of sort of recognition and acceptance, deep breathing, learning to let go. What is, and
Well
you
said,
can't fight
David.
it.
Yeah, well said. I mean, just listening to you speak, I feel a little bit more spacious. So your words do make a difference, at least for me, and I think for our listeners out here who'll be tuning into this later. We covered a lot of territory. I went through my whole list. Is there anything left out that you wanted to say something about, or did we pretty much do it?
Oh, let me see here. A moment to think.
Yeah. I do think we should
Um,
come back in a year and do it again.
I'd be happy to do. I've
Okay.
enjoyed this conversation a lot.
I'm so glad to get to know you better. And,
Yeah, I have the feelings
we've,
mutual completely.
we've had a long connection and
Yeah.
mostly in silence, but now we get to know each other better. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's about all I got for now.
yeah. I want to thank you for making the time in your schedule to talk with
Oh,
me. And like I said, I think we should do this again. And maybe if listeners had questions, they could send them in to me and we could
okay.
talk a little bit more as this continues to unfold. And I just want to take a moment to thank you for your precious work at the Center for Sacred Sciences because you are working with students. I think you have two groups
Mhm.
twice a week, and you give Sunday talks, and it is such a labor of love and service. And I thank you for that. I want to bow to you for your offerings, and wish you the very best. And we'll come to a close.
Well, I would like to thank you so much in all the same respects because I think all the same things are true of you.
Yeah.
And you've been serving us all for a long time, and it means a great deal to all of us. So thank you. I mean, this is a gift to me
Oh,
too.
sweet.
And just being here talking with you is a gift. So
Wonderful. Goosebumps.
anytime you want.
And both of us, we agree that we're grateful for Joel for getting this
Oh,
whole thing going and creating the
oh my God.
center, and on it
Yeah,
goes. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Just one of the top of the list of important people in my life.
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Thank you,
And
Dave.
you and others at the center. Thank you so much, Mary Song. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.